trials for Yahweh's servants. Why would God devise a plan where his beloved servants, even his own beloved son, is required to go through trials and persecutions and hard times? Let's look at it in a little simpler perspective. If you were passed over for a promotion by a manager, let's say I passed over you for consideration, you would come to me and say, how come you didn't consider me for that position? And my response would be to you, that I didn't think you were the person for that job. And you would say, but try me. Give me a chance. Put me to the test. See if I'm good enough for that. I'd say, sorry, I have been watching you. And I observed that you like to take the easy way out. You don't like stress. You don't like problems at work. You like the easy, the smooth way. This job is not for you. You have been put to the test. But you say, but try me. I could do this job. But sorry, I have been trying you. I have been observing you in your current position, and you're not for that position. You just take the easy way. You don't like the stress. You don't like the problems. You want to get out early. So therefore, the answer is no. You've already failed the test. Even in the animal kingdom, before the canines are ready for the military or police work, they've got to be tried. Are they able to handle the position, or will they yield to their own instincts? Or do they listen to the commands and follow directions even when under testing? Some are ready for the position, some are not. We want to be tested. We want to be tried if it will bring about the end result that we want. Even Christ, we're told, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. Christ felt it was worthwhile. We had Moses. Also, that same mentality, who felt it was worth more to suffer affliction with the children of Israel than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season. There will only be one person in the kingdom that never sinned. But brethren and sisters, there will be no one, absolutely not one in the kingdom that has not been tried, had not been tested, has not proved their love, their desire, their yearning for that position. It's a prerequisite. And so it should not be surprising to us that David, a man after God's own heart, was put under severe testing. At first, things started out pretty good for David. He became a hero as a young man by killing Goliath. He becomes the king's armor bearer, the king's son-in-law. And in those positions, David didn't do a bad job. He was very faithful. He did a very good job. But then one evening when he was playing on his harp for the king, he has the sidestep as a javelin goes winging past him into the wall behind him, and he's forced to flee. At home he had a loving wife, but he would find no rest and no comfort there. For he goes home, and Saul surrounds the house to kill him. Have you ever felt unfairly treated? not given the respect, not given the position or the status that you deserved, been reprimanded or even fired completely unjustly, how did you feel? David worked for Saul. He worked hard and faithfully for him. And we know how he felt because he wrote about it in the Psalm, in 59th Psalm. It says, this psalm was written when Saul sent and they watched the house to kill him. He says, deliver me from mine enemies, O my God. Defend me from them that rise up against me. Deliver me from the workers of iniquity, and save me from bloody men. For lo, they lie in wait for my soul. The mighty are gathered against me, not for my transgression or for my sin, O Lord. I didn't do anything wrong, and he's got the chief men of the army coming to kill me. He could do nothing. His own strength was only useful to flee. And so he does. And he devises a plan where he meets secretly with Jonathan, and they devise a signal. And David waits while his friend feels out his father. And David's hiding in the field. David undoubtedly spent those several days waiting for Jonathan's answer in the most fervent prayer we could imagine, praying that things would go right for him, that he could get back home, that things would go back to normal. But when Jonathan arrives and the lad at the agreed upon time and spot, David's worst fears are realized. And he hears those dreaded words, that unthinkable message that he did not want to hear. He sees Jonathan shoot the arrows as far and as hard as he could over the lad's head and says, are not the arrows beyond thee? Make speed, haste, stay not. And so the lad gathers up the arrows and is sent back into the city, and David comes out of hiding. Grief seizes the two lone figures. He was forced to forsake his wife, his companions, his friends, and become an outcast, a lonely outlaw, and for no reason. Oh yes, brothers and sisters, there was a reason. But that is the work of the Good Samaritan. The person that has no help, cannot help himself. And him that hath no helper hath God chosen. We read of David and Jonathan's feelings at this time. Told they kissed one another and wept one with another until David exceeded. Here we see a man completely distraught, a man who has just lost everything. His wife, his house, his job. He's forced to flee with nothing. We just sang, when in trouble, let this thy comfort be, God helpeth thee. Was God helping David? Was God really with David at this point? How would we react? David broke down and wept. Weeping relieves feelings and inner emotions, but weeping does not solve problems. We can see another man brought to this same point of utter helplessness in the prostrate figure at the Garden of Gethsemane. And yet he reaches the moment of ultimate resolution, of final commitment. With gentle resignation still, he yielded to his Father's will in sad Gethsemane. Then he gets up and he says to his disciples, "Arise, let us be going. He that betrayeth me is at hand." Out of our tears, brethren and sisters, finally, if there's going to be of any value to us in them at all, there must be that resolve of spirit at the end. Arise, let us be going. Perpetual and inconsolable grief is defeat and self-destruction. However great our burden, however irreplaceable the loss, however terrible the desolation which brings about our sorrow, the moment must come when, having poured all our tears into his bottle, we must say, as Christ did, "Arise, let us be going." Thus Jonathan lifted David from his well of grief, and Jonathan said to David, "Go in peace, forasmuch as we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, The Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever." And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. As an outlaw, David would miss his home life. He would long for the water from the well of Bethlehem while in the hot desert. But as much as home life and home are treasured by us all, they were not the blessings which David missed the most. "One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." Brethren and sisters, never lose sight of the main goal, no matter what trials may come upon us, no matter how severe we may feel them. And never cease to appreciate or undervalue that which we have here in the association that we have one with another. And those emblems that we partake of each Sunday morning and what they mean to us and what they stand for. That was the consolation that David had. Not that he didn't go through the trials, not that things worked out smoothly for him, but he kept the goal, the big picture in mind. And while David's out in the wilderness hiding, Saul's not content. He sends the army out into the wilderness after him, and he pursues them. Saul camps right near where David was hiding, and he has the opportunity to do to Saul what Saul was trying to do to him. So David and Abishai came to the people by night. And behold, Saul lay sleeping within the trench, and his spear stuck in the ground at his bolster. But Abner and the people lay round about him. Then said Abishai to David, "God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now, behold, let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him a second time. One quick swipe, that's all it's going to take, and your trials are over. I can do it right now. Finish it. No more being chased around the wilderness, fleeing for your life. I can solve it for you." And David said to Abishai, "Destroy him not. For who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" No, I'm not going to do that. That wouldn't be right. The Lord forbid that I should stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But I pray thee, take thou now the spear that is in his bolster, and the cruse of water, and let us go. We could always justify, we can always rationalize what we want to do. This is the day God spoke of. Remember, he promised you the kingdom? Look, he's given it to you. Right now, I can finish him off. Think of all these people that are with you. This madman's trying to kill you. He's going to kill probably half of these innocent people. Let's solve that problem. You care about your men, right? Let me take off his head right now. One shot. Won't take a second one. Brethren and sisters, we can always rationalize. We can always justify. We can always find a real good reason to do what we want to do. That which would be in our temporary best interest. Solve the immediate problem that we're in. But we must learn to do what is commanded. And let the chips fall where they may, wherever that may be. It's not the easy way out. But brethren and sisters, we're in training for a very important position. And fortunately for us, David reveals his rationale. He reveals to us what he was thinking and why he acted the way he did. David and Abishai go up on the other hillside and they call to Abner. And after reproving him for allowing the king to be exposed, David addresses Saul. Behold the king's spear. Let one of the young men come over and fetch it. The Lord render to every man his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord delivered thee into my hand today, but I would not stretch forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. And look at this next verse. This is the crux of it. This is what David's motivation was. And behold, as thy life was much set by or valued this day in mine eyes, so let my life be much set by or valued in the eyes of the Lord. And let him deliver me out of all tribulation. Brothers and sisters, he saw the big picture. Not the immediate solving of the temporary trial he was going through. But if I act kind and merciful towards people, whether they deserve it or not, whether they're good or bad, there may be a day coming that I will need God to act that way toward me. And brethren and sisters, when that day came, and it will come, when that day came, mercy was provided for David. Do we see the purpose in trials? How many of us pray, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us? Is that really the way we want to be forgiven? Do we really mean that? Do we want God to forgive us as we forgive others? Then act that way now. This is our testing grounds. How do we make decisions? Fleshly, carnal reasoning? What's in our own personal immediate best interest, or thus saith the Lord? Abishai was there. He was a trusted, loyal friend. But he gave the wrong advice. No matter how good the person we're with, no matter how faithful a brother, a friend, a sister, no matter how righteous they may be, we all give wrong advice on occasion. Fleshly, carnal reasoning is present in every one of us. Look at Peter, one of the chosen 12, one of the top 3, Peter, James, and John, top 3 of the 12. And yet, be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. Get thou behind me, Satan. We always must look at the big picture. And we are responsible for what we advise others, and we are responsible for what we do, whether it's advice from another or not. What we do and say is how we will be judged. It is by our words and by our works that we stand before Christ. And that is the reason for us being tried and prepared now. Let's look at another trial that David went through. He didn't always get it right. He had that same fleshly nature that we have. So we have David out in the wilderness fleeing from Saul. And he and his men assist Nabal's men in the wilderness. And David expected something for that. He desperately needed any help he could get at that point in his life. And Nabal did not treat David the way that he should have. Now, David had said, "Surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missing of all that pertained unto him. And he hath requited me evil for good. So and more also do God unto the enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him by the morning light, any that urinates against the wall." And David said unto his men, "Gird ye on every man his sword." And they girded on every man his sword, and David also girded on his sword. I'll teach him. He's got to do it the right way. He didn't do right by me. You do it right or else. And this time, brothers and sisters, the advice did not come from Abishai. Came from a woman in the enemy's camp. And there's exhortation in this incident for all of us. She could have kept quiet. Who am I to reprove David? He's so much more knowledgeable, so much more spiritual, so much greater than I am. Besides, I'm a sister. I think we'll leave that for a brother to do. Or she could have come back at him just like he was coming at her family. What are you doing? That's the wrong thing to do. You have no business doing that. Get it right or else. Or she could have made excuses for Nabal. We could think of all kinds of scenarios, but she acted. But look at how she acted. She reasoned with David. It was that still small voice, that lesson that Elijah needed to learn. That lesson that we all need to learn. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the culvert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. And when Abigail saw David, She hasted and lighted off the ass and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground and fell at his feet and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be. And let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thy audience and hear the words of thine handmaid. What is she doing? Why should she respond that way? She's right, he's wrong. Brothers and sisters, if you think that way, look at Galatians. Brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault, ye which are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, considering thyself, lest thou also be tempted. For if any man think himself to be something, when he is nothing, he deceiveth himself. So let's get it straight. You are nothing, and I am nothing. We don't always get it right. It doesn't matter if we're a brother, a sister, if we're high, if we're low. We need to be there for one another, to give good, spiritual, sound, scriptural advice in love, in humility, and not carnal, fleshly reasoning. Abigail goes on, I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thy handmaid, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house. This was before the promises to David, but she was there. She will make my Lord a sure house, and it shall come to pass when the Lord shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel, that this shall be no grief of mind unto thee, or offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. But when the Lord shall have dealt well with my Lord, then remember thy handmaid. And once again, here we see it's Abigail looking at the big picture, looking at the end results, not so much the immediate crisis. It's the big picture, the future results of her decision. And David said to Abigail, Blessed be thou of the Lord God of Israel, which sent thee this day to meet me. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou, which hath kept me this day from coming to shed blood, and from avenging myself with mine own hand. She was there. He recognized. So David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, Go up in peace to thine own house. See, I have hearkened unto thy voice, and I have accepted thy person. Let's look at another example. God's hand in David's life. God helpeth thee. No, God bringing David down and showing him that man is utterly helpless to save himself. This one occurs once again in the wilderness while David is hiding from Saul. He's in the cave with 400 of his men. And Saul, who has come with his armies to kill him, comes right to the cave where David is hiding. And he decides to spend the night in the cave where David is hiding. I wonder how much providence David saw in that. If God was with me, why didn't he send him over to a different mountain, or at least to a different cave? Not right here. Did you ever play hide and seek? Somebody's looking for you and they're getting closer and closer. The feeling of tenseness, you got to be quiet. Saul and his men are trying to kill David and they come right into the cave. David has nowhere to go. He's trapped. He's stuck in the cave while Saul and his men are sleeping in the mouth of the cave. And he's going to kill him. He was so close to death. Absolutely no way out to escape and absolutely no way to protect himself. And once again, David is brought right to the brink. And him that hath no helper. What would you be thinking? David tells us what he was thinking. David tells us, the Lord will be a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. And they that know thy name will put their trust in thee. That's the message, brothers and sisters. That's the lesson. That's what we've been talking about. And they that know thy name will put their trust in thee. Not in something else, not in anything else. David could write these words, having experienced them firsthand. Is God a refuge for us? Or is it our friends, our neighbors, our brothers and sisters, our TV, our computer, our job, our bank account, our 401k? David didn't have anything. Time after time, he's brought right to the edge where he had nowhere to turn, where he had nothing. And there was no one to turn to. He says in Psalm 130, out of the depth have I cried unto thee, O Lord. The depth of anguish, of despair. Out of the depth have I cried unto thee, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let thine ears be attentive to the voice of my supplications. After a time, David's still in the wilderness, but things got a little better for him. He was given his own city within the Philistines' borders, a place where Saul wouldn't dare go and try to attack him. Some of Saul's chief men desert Saul's army and join with David. He and his men settle down. They build homes. They have families. And upon being turned back from allowing to go and fight against Israel, David and his men take a 3-day journey back to Ziklag. And instead of being greeted by their wives and children as they may well have expected, they're greeted with smoke on the horizon. The first glimpse of the town would reveal embers of what used to be their homes. Nothing remained. The whole town had been sacked, burned, destroyed, and there was absolutely no sign of life anywhere. And once again, David and his men have lost everything. They're reduced to nothing. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burnt with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. absolutely, utterly distraught. Nothing left. David says, I am weary with my crying. My throat is dry, mine eyes fail, while I wait for my God. How could things get worse than this? But brethren and sisters, they do. His men, the 400 men that were with him, that David had trained, that were so close to him, now turn against him. And they speak of stoning David because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. David could turn to no one. And him that hath no helper. Have you ever felt that way? No one to turn to? We usually have a family member, a brother and sister in Christ, somebody that we can turn to. I'm talking about him that hath no helper. Right up against it. Nowhere to turn. Nothing to do. And yes, there was a reason for it all. The question to consider is, why was a man after God's own heart, one who worked with God and God with him, why was he subject to such cruel banishment and such dreadful, bitter treatment? David answers that. In Psalm 119, he says, it is good for me that I have been afflicted, that I might learn thy statutes. Let's look at one last incident of terrible trial in David's life before closing. David had now gotten to be king, as promised. He had gotten wealth and fame. He had defeated his enemies. And then trouble reoccurs. This time, his own son attempting to kill him. And once again, he is forced to flee and leave everything behind. Flee for his life. And as he flees, he encounters Shimei. And when King David came, behold, thence came a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei. He came forth and cursed still as he came. And he cast stones at David and at all the servants of King David and all the people. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son. And behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. David knew that he had been faithful to Saul. In everything he did, it was Saul that had mistreated and abused David, not the other way around. And here he is being publicly humiliated and reprimanded falsely. Would our response be like David's? And once again, Abishai is right there at his side with advice. Then said Abishai the son of Zeruiah unto the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. But look at David's response. And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjaminite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. It may be it may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men went by the way, Shimei went along on the hillside over against him and cursed as he went and threw stones at him and cast dust. Once again, we see David looking at the big picture, not focusing on Shimei. Yes, he's wrong and he's cursing the king and he should be killed, and Abishai is right. How do I protect myself? Make my life better? Make my life a little more comfortable? Not considering that Shimei was totally incorrect. No, his thoughts are, peradventure the Lord hath said, curse David. Maybe this is another test. Maybe this is another trial. It may be that the Lord is testing me to see how I respond. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. Brothers and sisters, can we develop the mind and thought processes of David? Let me rephrase that. We must develop the mind and thought processes of David. That is why we are here. The thing revealed to us is this: whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth. And we are assured that if we suffer with him, we shall also reign with him. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our brother Jim